Julie, it's such an honor and a pleasure to meet with you today. Thank you so much for spending time with us. This is awesome. You know, when we moved here several years ago and I was looking to get back into riding, I just kind of asked a few local people and then other people I didn't know, and your name always came up. Julie Pico, that's who you need. That's who you need, Julie Pico. She's our local horse whisperer. So thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today.
Yeah, I'm excited to do this today.
Great. So I'm sure everybody's curious, as I am, a little bit about your background. Where did you grow up and how did you get into riding?
So I grew up out in Lakeside. My parents were not horsey at all. Luckily, my godmother was. So before kindergarten, she would watch my sister and and I'd be riding the horse with her daughter, and they kind of got me hooked on it. And then probably when I was about 6, my sister and I were just walking around with a neighbor kid and walked down to this riding stable and we started doing lessons. So I grew up doing hunter jumpers. Probably by the age of 9, I saved up my money and bought this terrible little pony that loved to jump. And I think I fell off on a regular basis at least once a week. But I survived my childhood and went on to ride bigger horses that were a little more well-mannered.
Oh, it sounds like a storybook tale.
Yeah.
You know, it really does. So who had the horses in the very beginning? Did your godmother?
Yeah, so my godmother had horses. She lived up in Verona, and so we would go up there and hang out with her. And then once we started doing lessons, we lived so close to the barn. I was walking down there every day after school. I was the ranch kid that would never leave,
And is that, did you work for riding abilities or?
Not so much. It was probably more like free daycare is how my mom looked at it. But there was a big group of us. I'm still good friends with a lot of the kids that grew up riding down there. And we would go to a lot of the shows, and we were always the group that, I hate to use the word misfits, but we were the ones that probably didn't have the nicest horses. But my trainer was always really good about teaching us, you show up with clean tack, a clean horse, well put together, and it's not always about having the expensive horse, but trying hard. And so we were pretty competitive at the shows. And so she really passed that along to me, and I still teach a lot of the same stuff that she taught us growing up, and it's fun to pass that along.
That is wonderful. So when did you and how did you get your first horse?
I had a little bit of money, over the years, people send you, money for Christmas and birthdays. And so I had a little nest egg, and my trainer had come home from a horse show with this little pinto pony named Ritzy, and she thought he'd work out for me. And I still remember my parents coming to watch me ride him, and I jumped him over the brick wall. Was like a big deal. I jumped over the brick wall. He dumped me. I'm laying in the dirt crying, and my mom's like, "You don't want that pony still, do you?" I'm like, "I love him." So $350 I bought Ritzy, and we were a mess. But I outgrew him, sadly. And so my trainer was awesome. She decided she would trade me. So she had this big thoroughbred named Kevin that was kind of a handful. And so she took Ritzy and I got Kevin and started doing more jumpers, which is more timed jumping. And he was fun. I mean, if we were on it, we were on it, and we could get through a course pretty well and be competitive. And she kept Ritzy until he passed away just a few years ago. She moved to New Mexico, and he lived out on a couple 100 acres and had a good retirement.
Oh, that's wonderful, wonderful. And so Kevin sounds like your first kind of real horse, so to speak, that you started competing, and how did that change your life at that time?
Oh my gosh, he was fun. So he was that next step up. It was going from a pony up to a real horse that you could ride and be competitive on. And I was that kid that would, Fiona, I wanted to show, but I also wanted to go out on the trail. And I don't think Kevin had done much trail riding. I rode that horse all over Lakeside. And at the time, I drive by this spot and I just cringe. But we lived on the wrong side of the freeway from where the trails were. So my trainer was like, oh, just stand on the corner of the highway, and when you don't hear any noise, just gallop across. We're all on these thoroughbreds, you know. I would never do this. And we would just gallop across Highway 67 to ride over in the riverbed. You know, and as a kid, you don't think twice about it, but every time I drive past that spot, I'm like, I can't believe I survived my childhood.
I think a lot of people would agree with
you
on that one.
Yeah.
Wow. So once you started to get more involved with the real horse world, what you think back then, what were your dreams? Did you ever aspire to, you know, oh, someday I'm going to go to the Olympics, or, you know, I'm going to be the best in California? Or...
No, I honestly thought, probably more middle school aged, I really thought that I would be the one person that went to the Olympics and ran in track and competed in equestrian sports. I thought I could do both.
Okay. Oh.
That was how naive I was.
Okay. That's good though. That's good.
Yeah. And I did run track in high school, but then realized, maybe I'm not as fast as I thought I was. So I stuck with horses. But I think, too, as you start to go along and get into that higher level of competition, you kind of go, I don't know if it's really where I'm at, you know? Is it really the best thing for the horse and the ride? You know, I got kind of more into, like, just having fun with my horse and what does my horse want to go do? I'm going to go compete in dressage because he seems like a dressage horse. So I kind of just always was willing to kind of show in different avenues and disciplines, and kind of always just did what the horse wanted.
Well, that brings up an interesting question. How do you know what the horse wants to do?
Oh, I laugh. I think they tell you. I had this one client years ago, and her horse was so naughty, but he was really talented. And I was like, you know, I think he wants to really be a circus horse. I think he'd really... She never tried it to see if that's what he wanted to do. But sometimes you get a vibe and you're like, I think that's what they want to do. I know I had a draft horse for years, and she loved to show. She really thought once she went in that show arena that everyone was there for her. She'd be outside the show arena looking like Eeyore, falling asleep. And the second you went in, ears are up, heads up, and she's like on point. So I do think that they find their job and their niche, and they like it. So, you know, you just keep trying new stuff and keep it fresh with the horse. So they'll let you know.
Well, you really have to be a very sensitive person, I think, to pick up on that and feel that connection. How would someone start to do that if they had their horse and they're like, oh, gee, I really want to be like that? What can they do?
I think that is where it's hard for new owners is... you know, that maybe they get a horse for one discipline, but maybe that horse is sour to it, and they keep pushing through and trying to get the horse to, you know, go do like Western pleasure or something, and you can tell the horse is just miserable. But you go try something else, and that's something I always tell my students. Like, I know you might think that like showing in a halter class is really boring, but it's good. Knowledge is knowledge. So do a little bit of everything with your horse, and you'll figure out what they like doing.
As the horse tells you in so many ways through their body language, and as you're saying, you know, she perked up when she got into the ring, and the different sounds that the horses make. What do they mean?
Sometimes it's funny. I have this big percher on that just came in maybe a month ago, and I had first moved her down here, and so she was making new friends. She sounded like a dinosaur. It sounded like I had a T-Rex on the property. She was just squealing and just being very dramatic. But over time, she stopped doing it. And so I think some horses, it's kind of their way to be a little protective of themselves is to act like the big dog on the property, and they're going to be aggressive and don't beat them up or whatever. But you know, eventually they kind of figure out their hierarchy, like all these horses can live together fine. And I do think that having horses live turned out together is really good. I think that'll actually fix a lot of behavioral issues. So.
And how would you turn out your horses?
I always start out by having them live together next to each other. Because you don't want to just throw them together right away. They might kick or bite or, you know, hurt one another. And so I try to do it too. If I'm going to first put horses in together, they need to be in a bigger area. So I might put them in the arena at first, somewhere where there's no corners, where they can corner one horse and start beating them up. And so you just start slowly, and then eventually they kind of figure out their pecking order, and they're good.
It's absolutely fascinating. You know, we were talking earlier. You had mentioned that sometimes you feel like you're a psychologist, and that certainly comes true. I mean, you had to figure out all these things, but actually, it does sound like there is hope for us who do not know anything about horses, but if you spend time with them, you'll get to know them as long as you allow that to happen.
Yeah,
right?
And I always tell new owners that your first year of horse ownership is brutal. You will cry, you'll think you made the biggest mistake in the world. But after that year, you kind of get to know your horse more, and you can read what they're going to do and prevent things from happening, or just understand why your horse is doing it, and put yourself in a better situation, you know, safety-wise, to maybe not get into as much trouble as you did when you first bought the horse.
Exactly. I mean, not only your own safety, but the horse's safety. Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
I know I've asked you about this before, because some people really are fixated on a particular kind of breed. Can you talk a little bit about the breeds that you've worked with and what your thoughts are about that?
Yeah, so I grew up and it was mostly thoroughbreds that we had. It wasn't the norm to be importing all these warm bloods in. And so your thoroughbred was really, if you wanted to ride English, you were showing a thoroughbred. And they're super sensitive. You definitely have to be able to read a horse if you're going to be around one. Super sweet horses, all heart, but they can overreact to situations and get themselves into some trouble pretty quick. So I think that actually probably me being around thoroughbreds as a kid really helped me with my horsemanship as I got older. And so I still love the beauty of a thoroughbred. I probably don't want to own another one right now, just because they are higher energy and it's not really where I'm at with my life. But then I got into working with some of the draft horses. I worked at Cinderella Carriage Company driving carriages in downtown San Diego, and the drafts are they really are gentle giants. I mean, they just think nothing of being around all the traffic and the noise and the people, and they really kind of thrived on it. You know, they want to be around people. I've worked a lot with Friesians and Gypsies. It seems like a lot of the people that have Friesians also kind of have the Gypsy Vanners. So it's all about the show and the hair and, you know, kind of the glitz. And showing the Friesians was fun. I remember I had clients that had this fabulous stallion, Van Helsing, and we got to show at the World Friesian Show. They had it down in Del Mar, and I remember warming up for one class. There were a lot of people in it, probably 20, 25 riders. And I'm warming up and I'm like, oh my gosh, everyone's speaking like German and they're like serious riders, you know? And I'm warming up and the horses are just foaming and frothing and sweating. And I'm just warming up, having a good time on Van. And we go in and we place sixth. I was like really proud, you know? And we were the only ones in the class riding in just a loose ring snaffle and not dripping in sweat, and we just went in there and had a good time. So to me, that was just as rewarding as winning the class. You know, we went in and held our own and we had fun, you know.
It sounds great.
Yeah.
And with all of the breeds that you have worked with, I know that you don't really have a favorite. You've expressed that because of how you look at it. I'm also interested, you seem to have sort of a pet whose name is Francis,
yes.
And I'm sure a lot of people would like to hear about that.
So Francis, I met him back in 2004. At the time I was showing draft horses a lot, and when you show the draft horses, the mules are also there. And I had a client that had just bought a mule, and I was like, hey, I'm already going to be at the show, let's enter your mule. And I'm out warming him up, and that sucker he threw me off so quick. And that's something that mules, they're so flexible. Like, I swear they're double jointed. You'll be on them and the next second you're on the ground. You don't even know what happened. And I don't mind falling off, but I do mind getting trampled. And so I'd fallen off. I'd try to catch the mule. He runs me over. I think he ran me over 3 times that day. I finally caught him, put him back in the barn stall, and was like, I'm not competing on this mule. So then this really nice lady that was stabled behind us came over and was like, you're already signed up for all these classes. Why don't you just show this new mule I got? She's like, I don't know if he knows much. I know he was a racing mule up at Bishop. Just try him out. So I rode him in barrels and Western riding and all kinds of stuff. And I was like, this mule's fun. But he had the bad habit of bolting when you'd get on and off. So you had to be pretty good about landing on your feet when you dismounted. So I would kind of show him for a few years off and on. You know, she was going to Bishop and I was going to be there. I would show Francis, and I always liked him. I just thought he was the cutest little thing. And real sensitive, always kind of worried, the boogeyman somewhere, you know. And then years go by, I hadn't really heard from the gal that owned him, and she called me out of the blue one day and was like, do you think you could ever buy him? I'm like, I never have money, you know. I go, I have a yearly mule, I'll trade you. And I was shocked. She was like, yeah, come up today and swap him out. So I've never hooked up a trailer that fast in my whole life. And I went up there and got Francis, and, you know, I rode him for years. I would go to a lot of the local dressage shows, and he was funny. He really liked the dressage thing, I think, because it was just him and me, and we could just focus. And I remember riding one time down in Poway. I'm in the middle of my test, and some horse gets loose on the property, and the judge is flagging me down during my dressage test, like, stop, stop. And I'm like, oh, he won't care. You know, stuff like that doesn't bother him. So we just kept going on with our test, and judges really like him. He's just super cute, and actually really forward moving for a mule. Sometimes they tend to not be real forward. And I always liked, we would go to the Arab show down in San Marcos, and they have like all breed classes. So I would take a lot of my lesson kids down there, and one of them, Maya, she always really liked Francis, and she would show him, and he would win most of the classes down there. The Arab judges really liked him, and he was always well-mannered at a horse show, never made noise, super serious. You know, he likes showing, but at Bishop around other mules, he's not that into it. He'd rather be at a horse show. So he's funny. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Whoa.
So
wonderful.
He's a good little guy.
Wonderful, wonderful. And just thinking about you being the local horse whisperer, what does that really mean to you? I'm sure that you may not think of yourself that way, and so to speak, but that's quite a tagline for you.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, you know, I don't know if I would consider myself a horse whisperer, but I'm definitely kind of a problem solver with people and their horses. And I think that's something too where, you know, people hear the word whisper and they think it's all kind of butterflies and rainbows with the horses. And it's not. It's a lot like raising children. There's times where you've got to be kind of, you know, the hardcore mom and, you know, really
tough
yell
love
at your kid. Yeah. But then eventually you can give them that look and they know you mean business and they, you know, straighten up. And so horses are a lot like that. At first you might have to be really tough on them, but then eventually you want really light approaches with them. And it gets that way. So, you know, it starts out where, you know, horse owners, I think, sometimes they don't get tough enough. And so they let a little problem become a big problem. So then you're going back to the basics and fixing it. So
that makes a lot of sense, especially being a parent.
Yeah.
Anyone who's,
you know how it
who's
is.
raised any animals or kids. Yeah, it is challenging at times, but so rewarding at the end, you know.
When you see that end result, and, you know, horses want to please, they want to be good, but if you're not being a good leader, they just get confused.
Okay, so they're really looking to you to show them the way. What do you want from me, kind of thing?
Yep. And so if you're not giving clear direction, then they don't know what to do. That's when you're going to get more behavior problems.
It's interesting because when you talk about the different types of people that you've worked with, you mentioned something about, you know, the overconfident one and then the one who's scared. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so it's interesting because that overconfident rider, they often get into the most trouble because you're constantly like, you've got to warm your horse up. You can't just get on and start galloping, you know? So I'm always like, okay, 5 minutes of walking, and then you've got to trot for so much time, and then you can canter, and or they just don't take the time. Their horse hasn't been ridden in 3 weeks and they pull it out and just hop on it. You're just asking for trouble. You got to maybe lunge your horse before you ride him. Whereas that timid rider, they might spend too much time in the round pen, but once you get their confidence up, they really kind of get more out of that that bond with their horse. And I think that it's a real confidence booster. That's where I think horses are great for kids, because if you can ride this 1,000-pound animal, you're probably not going to be that kid getting bullied at school. You're going to have the confidence to stick up for yourself.
That's a great metaphor. I like that. I like that a lot. So would you say then perhaps it might be better to take a slower approach in getting to know your horse and being gentle about it?
Yeah. There's a lot of times too where, maybe somebody adopts a horse, they take it home, they don't give it time to settle in. They just think they can hop on it the next day. Your horse doesn't know what happened. They don't know you're the new owner and what's going on. And, so it's always better to be cautious, give them time to settle in, let them see stuff, and you'll have a better result in the end.
Sure, absolutely. So the age groups that you give lessons to, horses and people, could you talk a little bit about that?
Oh my gosh, I don't do a whole lot of little kids anymore, just because until you're about 6, you can't really have that much control with the horse. But I do have a few little kids that'll come up, and they might be as young as like 3, and we do a lot of pony ride kind of stuff. And the other fun one too is I'll get out some paint and they'll paint the horse. It's all that kind of stuff that's really, it gets them comfortable with the horse, and they're kind of being involved, but they're not, being thrown up on the horse and put in a dangerous situation. And I've got some ladies that come up that are probably in their early 70s that are still out there riding, so it's a wide range.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Wow. It's absolutely fascinating. So you also talk about, and we touched on this a little bit, I just want to make sure I've got it. So you're not only training... Okay. Okay. So you're not only training horses, and I want you to talk about that too, because I'm hoping that, this is also going to attract a lot of people to you for both.
Right.
Horse rescuing, maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yep.
And then the training of the horses, and then how you work with the person. Because that's a special skill in itself. Being able to communicate in a way that they're receptive.
Yeah.
Just like horses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Everyone learns a little differently.
Yeah, we all do. It's a special skill. I think when you said you were you consider yourself more of a psychologist, I think you're right.
Yeah.
I really do. It's so much that goes into it. I never thought about it.
Yeah.
I grew up, jumping on a horse.
And just riding.
Yeah, and just grabbing the mane and taking off.
Right. So many people say that.
Move your paper for a second. I'm just getting shots of the dog by the truck.
Okay.
The dirty dog.
Yeah, you can't.
Oh, someone's pulling in too.
Expecting somebody?
They can come whenever and see their horse. We'll see.
Right.
Yeah.
Of course.
See which kid it is. Don't bark. Fiona, you're filthy.
Bo.
Oh, Bo! Come on.
Sleeping in the sun. That must feel good. What a good boy.
It's funny. Oh, it's little Addison's aunt. One of my little lesson kids is out of town, so her aunt must be here to get the horse out.
Aww. Okay, so we're gonna...
Yeah, we're good. You can start.
Okay. So can we talk a little bit about that?
Say the question
again.
Yeah,
yeah, sure, of course. So in training horses, you're also training the people. And that in itself, to me, really requires a special skill, because you're dealing on a couple of different levels here.
Right. And I think one of the things too, where people kind of get into trouble with the horses is maybe they buy a horse that they're not quite ready for. So a lot of times, that rider, I might put them on one of my lesson horses at first, just to get them getting their skill level up to meet their horse. And again, it all goes back into like learning how to read your horse. You can tell that they're going to drop their shoulder and maybe scoot off about a half lap early. But if you're not an experienced rider, you don't see that. So a lot of it too is just spending time with your horse. And that's where I'm always encouraging riders to go and do a lot of different things with their horse. Again, maybe you don't like showing halter, but it's a good way to put miles on your horse and get them in the arena and you're not riding them. And, it just puts the miles on them.
Okay.
So, but everybody does learn differently. So it is hard because that new rider shows up and I start using terms and they're like, I have no idea what she's talking about. Yeah. So it's like learning a new language, so when you first start trotting and posting on a horse and I might say, change your diagonal, they're like, what? So you really have to go back to the basics and explain to them the movement of the horse and why it's called the diagonal and what you're doing, while you're riding. So a lot of it's the language barrier, it's like taking a Spanish class. At first you don't really know what the teacher's saying. And then moving on to you get the lingo, now you've got to get your body to do it. And everybody learns quicker than others. And I think that a lot of times as a rider, you feel like, oh, I'm not progressing at all, But when you really look back, it just seems tedious that you're still doing the basics, but it takes time. And I know you can talk to my older lesson kids that are now adults and, my younger kids, I'll say, drop your stirrups. So they've got to post without their feet in the stirrups. And my older lesson kids are like, we feel the pain, we hated it too, but we're where we're at now because she made us do it, So you always go back to the basics and fixing your body position so you can help the horse.
Sure. It's all about becoming one, right?
Yeah. It's like Avatar, like you're plugged in,
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And how many years have you been training and teaching people to ride?
I started teaching, I was probably about 19 or 20 years old. I started getting a few lesson kids in. I worked actually a Girl Scout horse camp one time, and I don't think I'd ever do it again. It was a lot of kids that had to ride in one day, but it was enjoyable to see all those little kids and the smiles and, so you kind of start out at that level and then build up your business. And, once you get a lot of clientele, then it's, kind of just goes from there. But it's been over 20 years that I've been teaching and
That's
it's
a
fun.
long time.
Yeah. Like my first lesson kids are now pregnant and have children and married. And you're just like, oh my gosh, how did that happen?
Whoa.
It feels like just yesterday that I graduated high school. So it goes in a blink of an eye.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It does. Tell me a little bit about the rescue horses that you've been involved in. And one particular one.
So I work a lot with Falcon Ridge Equine Rescue. They're over here in Valley Center. And she usually sends me about one horse a month to kind of help rehab and train and get adopted. And I think one of the first horses she sent me was Put and Pop. She's over here with the other horses, and she's just so cute. But when Nikki first rescued her, I believe that Riverside Animal Control is the one that ended up with her in the beginning. She was so emaciated. She'd had lice. I mean, she was just in terrible shape. She's had quite a few very large brands on her that aren't normal. I almost wonder if they were done with like a hot knife or something. They're pretty big. So she'd not been handled very nicely. Nikki at Falcon Ridge had gotten her weight up. She was healthy. She was ready to kind of move on and get a job. So she came to me. I got her broke to ride. And while she was there, my son Johnny, he was probably 2.5 at the time, and she would just stare at him. Like she just loved him. And he's got a nice way with the animals, would always go pet her and stuff. And she ended up getting adopted out, and the lady that adopted her knew that the horse just loved my son. And so it didn't work out for that adoption. And so I was like, oh, I should just keep her for Johnny. So I went back down, picked her up. So I'm a bit of a trainer fail because I kept the horse. But she really was great for Johnny, and I'll keep her the rest of her life, because at the time Johnny he didn't really talk much, and he was just starting speech therapy, and his teachers would tell me, like, he would just come in and talk nonstop about him and Puddin'. And he would get her out, and he'd set up little obstacle courses with all his Matchbox cars and lead her through them. And, they just had this good little relationship. And, so I feel like she fulfilled her need for us as a family. I mean, she really helped my son, and, they were cute. They'd go to the Halloween shows at the Vaqueros and get all dressed up, and you'd go trick-or-treating on her. And so she's just cute. So she's probably my favorite rescue story,
You've had quite a few, I'm sure.
Yeah. I've always got at least one or two of Nikki's horses here, and, a lot of them end up with my lesson kids. I'll get them in for training and go, I think they'd work for this one kid. And I have one family that they just recently adopted a horse from Falcon Ridge, and the kids just found out last week it was their Christmas present, and they're up here every day riding that horse. So it's a perfect, perfect scenario.
It's beautiful. Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Vaqueros. Can you tell me something about that?
Yeah.
Hold on to that question. I
Okay.
I just got to get that. Move the
I'm sorry, honey?
block. Sorry, I got to move. You got to get the sun off you.
Oh, okay. That piece up there? Okay.
Well, move.
So we're going to talk about that. Yeah, okay. How are we doing on time? Good? I've got 12:11.
I'm fine.
You're good?
About Matt.
Okay. I love how the dogs just want to be here. It's so great. Yeah. Talked about Francis. I'll pull the mayor
the mayor
stuff.
thing.
I'll pull that off the
Yeah.
site.
Which I could talk about that part with the Vaqueros too.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Okay.
I forgot to bring that up.
I was curious, just as a side note, I was surprised to hear that how you showed him. Because, back in the day when I was growing up around horses, you had to have, a really
Right.
special horse to put it in a horse show. And you're coming with a mule. How did people...
They're usually pretty upset when you beat them. They're like, I can't even beat the mule,
I would think.
Yeah.
That would be,
Yeah.
tough
And-
acceptance.
A lot of times, that's why I would always ask the horse show manager if it was okay if
Of
I
course.
brought him.
Yeah.
Because mules are really smart and they tend to learn patterns really quickly.
Oh.
So it actually gives the competitor more of an edge by competing on a mule. So,
It's fascinating.
yeah.
I only had the stigma
Yeah.
about mules.
And some of the stigmas are true. Like them
Being
running
so
out with their
stubborn.
mouth gaping open. It
Yeah.
happens, you know.
And are they super stubborn?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. There's times out on the trail that like Francis won't go a certain way.
Uh-huh.
So I just let him go around, which is a way harder way. But for whatever reason, he thought something was going on there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just don't start a fight,
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Acceptance is a beautiful thing in life.
Yes.
Okay. I would say we're doing really good. Getting through quite a bit.
Is that off of PJ? Yeah. PJ, look at Julie.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks. All right.
Okay. So we're good. That
Shot.
the noise just stopped. Also,
Yeah.
are we good?
Stop. Yes.
So you were just mentioning the Vaqueros. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the Vaqueros is a local riding club here in Valley Center. They've actually been around since about 1960, which actually makes them probably one of the oldest equestrian clubs in San Diego, which is pretty cool. And so I've been on the board off and on for probably the last 12 years. I'm currently the president of the Vaqueros. They're a family-oriented club. When I first joined probably 12 years ago, they primarily did just gymkhanas. And I kind of thought, well, why are you limiting yourself? We should be offering something to every type of equestrian, in San Diego. So we started kind of branching out and doing more shows, and we've always kept the shows very inexpensive so that it encourages maybe more of that kind of backyard kid to clean up their horse, dust off their boots, and, come to the local show and, learn some stuff. And so I have always encouraged the judges in the lineup as they're placing the class to try to explain to the riders what they did well, what they could work on. So at least they're not walking away feeling defeated. I can still remember showing as a kid and the judge telling me look, you rode well, but you need to clean your boots. I've never gone in and shown with dirty boots ever again. So it's something really simple a lot of times in that first impression. So you always want to represent yourself clean and well put together, same with your horse. And so I think that that's where the Vaqueros is really good for these kids, is to come out there and learn and feel like they're kind of on an even playing field and they don't have to have that high-end horse and the fancy show equipment and stuff. And so we hope to kind of attract people outside of Valley Center to come and enjoy the Vaqueros. Our shows are really friendly. We've had people come from Temecula with their family and just be shocked at how, easygoing we all are and how much fun they had. And it's a really good group of really fun ladies. I've made a lot of really lifelong friendships by being a Vaquero member. We decided, it was probably back in 2016, 2017, that quite a few of us, our bucket list item was to ride in the Rose Parade. And so we thought, how can we get in? We've got to have this cool niche. So we decided, the club's been around since 1960. Let's have our niche be like vintage cowgirls. So luckily one of our Vaquero members was actually a clothing designer. So she came up with a really good kind of costume for us. And we kind of went on that kind of vibe of the old California cowgirl. And I think we looked super cute, and our outfits are probably what got us in. But it took us 2 years, and we got into the Rose Parade. We represented the Vaqueros. It was really fun. The weather was good. We all got along. We were like, we'll never do it again. But we were really happy and honored to be able to ride in the Rose Parade in 2018.
That was amazing.
Yeah.
That was on your bucket list, I'm
yes.
sure.
Yes.
Okay, we're gonna. Sorry, my fault. I'm gonna have to, because I know this is a shot that thick, so I'm gonna have to ask that question.
Oh.
That was a long-winded
That was
answer.
a long answer, yeah.
I mean, it's not to say we can't, not use it. It's just that I grab it. Is it out of your way?
Yeah, I'm good, honey. Okay, we have to do that one over?
I would just, it doesn't have to be, it could be shorter, answer, it could be...
Right, because we could put some B-roll in there too.
Well, yeah, but
Right.
I would ask it again.
Okay. Sorry, Julie.
And I don't even remember what I said.
It's okay, it'll be all good. We have the audio.
Yeah.
So it's all good. So let me know when you're ready.
Sorry.
It's okay.
And good.
Okay. You mentioned something about the Vaqueros. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so the Vaqueros, they're a local Valley Center equestrian club. We've been around since 1960. It's kind of a family-oriented club. We put on a lot of different shows. We try to keep them very inexpensive so that kind of that backyard kid can come and compete on their horse and feel like they're on an even playing field. We try to encourage the judges to criticize the kids. Good criticism. So we want them telling the kids what they've done well, what they could work on, so they walk away from it not feeling defeated and like they've got stuff to work on and come back and be more competitive next time. And so one of the really fun things that the Vaqueros did a few years ago was a bunch of the ladies and I decided that we really wanted to try to do the Rose Parade. So we got a group together. We were lucky that one of the ladies was a clothing designer. We decided to go off that kind of, the club's been around since 1960, so kind of more that vintage cowgirl look. And it turned out to be this really cool kind of old California cowgirl look that we ended up getting going. And in 2 years, we were able to be accepted into the Rose Parade, and it was fun. You're up there for a week, and great memories, great group of ladies that all went. And I think because randomly none of us fought, the weather was good, we thought we'll never do it again, but it was really fun that we all got to do it and enjoy it together. And I wouldn't change it for anything, but I don't think I'd do it again. It is a very long parade.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, I think it's like 8 or 9 miles. It's long.
That's very long.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you're up there for a week. You have to park your rig, your horses on the end of the freeway the night before.
Okay.
So New Year's Eve night, you're pulling in onto the freeway at about 11:30 at night, and you're not getting any sleep. And they wake you up. You have a set time that your group has to be ready, and they march you up to the beginning of the parade. It's really well organized. I don't think I've ever done an event that was that big and that well thought out.
Very interesting. And that just kind of makes me think about some of the competitions that you've been in and won, not only personally, but also with your horses. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Can I ask that question again and just back up a little bit with your,
Is that good?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
So that makes me think about other competitions, perhaps, even though this was sort of a competition, right?
Yeah.
You had to apply for it.
Yeah, it's hard to get. There's people all over the world trying to get into the Rose Parade.
Yeah, I would think so. Can you talk a little bit about some other competitions that you've been in, and not only with your horses, but you yourself personally?
So I've competed a lot. Again, I'll ride any horse, do any discipline, I'll try it. And so years ago, I'd had my clients that had the really nice Frisian van, and so competing with him at the World Frisian Show here in Del Mar was really exciting. That was probably, the highest quality show I'd been to. And so it was really rewarding. My kids were super little at the time, and we just all hung out in Del Mar for a week and showed van, and he was amazing. He ended up winning a world championship title in a Liberty class, and he was really a smart horse. And then another really fun show experience I had was with my horse Blossom. She was a rescue horse. She was a PMU horse that, I think she was probably 2.5 when I got her. She was pregnant and barely halter broke. And I got her broke to drive and ride, and I started doing actually carriage work with her. And we would go all over showing at these draft shows. And she actually in 2004 was the High Point draft horse at the LA County Fair. And it was very rewarding, She was just this little rescue horse doing her thing. And, we showed all over. I remember one time we loaded up, and I had my 2 kids and the dog in the horse cart and drove to Arizona and stayed there for a few days. And I would hook her up, and I'd get the kids, they were toddlers, and I'd give them the dog, and I'd be like, okay, follow me to the arena, and you guys sit in those bleachers and don't move. If you move, you're in trouble. And they were great. They'd sit there, they'd watch me show, we'd go back to the barn and hang out with Blossom the rest of the day. It was really fun. It was just, those kids went all over. So they were real troopers, and I don't know if they enjoyed it at the time, but maybe in 15 years they'll look back on it and realize it was a fun childhood. I don't know.
Well, I would think that they've learned a lot about life, as you have expressed about your own. If there was one word, if you will, to share with people what horses have taught you, what would that be?
I think to be humble. Especially a mule will teach you that pretty quick. But, the second you think you're doing really good, something happens, and all of a sudden you're like, got to go back to the basics again. I remember a few years ago, Sam and I, my daughter, we decided to take Francis up to Bishop and show him, and he was doing great. She showed him, I showed him, we were crying, he was doing good. You're thinking he's getting older, it's maybe his last time going to Bishop, and I'm warming him up for our dressage class, and it was our best. I've never had that good of a ride on that mule. He was warming up so well. We go in to do our test, I'm thinking I'm going to nail this. some guy walks down the bleacher, scares him. We barely get through our test, and after that, he wouldn't go in that same arena ever again. So, they humble you, and you got to just kind of go into it and not be so competitive. Just be like, you know what? It is what it is. We're going to do the best we can, and worst case scenario, we'll get some nice pictures of us at a show, So I think that horses really do teach you to be a humble person.
Talk to me a little bit about...
Wait for that plane to go by, but
okay. I want to ask you about being the Valley Center Female Citizen of the Year, and then you were a rodeo queen, and then your involvement in that organization. I think a lot of young women would like to hear that from you. Okay. And yeah, that'll take me. We're almost there. I also wanted to ask you, is this good, honey?
Yep.
Okay. Maybe before, well, no, let's talk about that first.
Before we start up, can you ask the second to last question just on camera so I have it clean?
The second to last question that I was asking her about competition.
You don't have to answer. Well, you could start answering, but if you're not.
Was that the second to the last question? I'm kind of jumping around here.
You are?
Yeah, I am, hon.
Whatever it was with the Rose Bowl, I think we
No, we got that. We did that twice.
Did we do a retake with the...
We did the...
When did we do the retake? What were you saying?
That was about the vaqueros.
Okay.
Yeah, we did that.
Right, so just ask that, whatever, just put out that question one more time for the vaqueros.
Matt, we did it twice.
I know, but just try to do it.
I'm pretty sure we've got it. I think we've got it, honey.
Just do it again.
Yeah, I think we've got that.
Okay.
I do.
Just say the question, that's all.
Just me ask the question?
Just ask the question. You don't have to, we're not redoing it.
Oh, okay. Can you talk to me a little bit about what the vaqueros is all about?
Okay, but don't look at me after you do the question.
Julie, you mentioned the vaqueros. Can
Wait,
you...
Your face is in the sun. Move out. Yeah. Okay, hold on.
Okay.
I might have to move that again. So. Go in the position that you're comfortable. Where are you comfortable?
I'm
right
good.
There?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, because they'll... Okay, go.
Okay. Julie, you mentioned the vaqueros. Can you tell us a little bit about that organization and what they do and how we can get involved?
Okay. All right.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. Good for you. You don't have to repeat it.
I'm like that.
Okay. We got the humility. I love that. And then wanted you to talk a little bit about, you talked about winning, competitions with your horses. I wanted you to mention about, being a rodeo queen and then the Citizen of the Year. I think those are two really good things to talk about. Anything else that I'm missing?
I don't think so.
And then, and then I wanted you to swing into how you're involved with the
pageant.
Yes,
thing,
yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay.
Okay.
Get in position. Okay, and ask the question. Yep.
Julie, can you talk about a little bit about your personal competitions? Perhaps that ones that didn't involve you and the horse, but just you as a human being.
So one of the things that probably people would be surprised about, although this kind of still involves a horse, but when I was in high school, I decided to run for Miss Rodeo Lakeside. I ran twice. The first year, not so good. Second year, I came back and I did a lot better. I was always that kid that kind of was fearful of public speaking. I was always really quiet in class, and doing that pageant made me kind of realize that when you are public speaking, you have the power, you control the room. And so it's kind of fun to get up there and, give a speech about something that people might be interested in. And so I didn't win that pageant, but I was first runner-up. And at the time, Lakeside didn't have junior queens. They had a queen, and then the two runner-ups were princesses. And it was basically being a rodeo queen. So I went around with my friend April, who was the queen, and we represented the Lakeside Rodeo doing parades and just other local rodeos. And so for me, that really gave me kind of a boost up in life. It made me realize how to do personal interviews with people and how to present yourself in public and horse girls tend to not always know about hair and makeup, and probably at the time I wasn't that good at it looking back, but I think it's something important to teach our young ladies. And so a few years ago I took over running the Valley Center Stampede Rodeo Queen pageant, and we've really built it up into kind of a big event in Valley Center. We have girls competing from the age of 6, I think, up to like mid-20s. There's 4 different age categories they can compete in, and it's really something important, I think, to teach these kids today. You know, so many of them are on their phone and they don't even know how to talk on the phone or talk in person with people. And so I think getting them to do stuff like this and, you know, learning how to present themselves in public, I think is really huge. I've got a lot of kids that, you know, they kind of run in the pageant because it's something fun to do with their friends. They don't really care about winning, but they really have a good time, and they come back to me years later and they're like, you know what, when I had to go to college and do an interview for something, like I knew how to sit and like, you know, make eye contact with people, and they're like, I learned it all at the pageant, you know? So to me, that's really rewarding. And I think that as adults, we've got to give back to the community, give back to the youth, get them involved in things other than electronics. So
that's beautiful. You were also voted Citizen of the Year?
Yeah, so in 2015, I didn't really even know this was a thing, but Stuart at A1, he's on the chamber, he called me to say that I was Citizen of the Year, and I was like, what? What is that? You know, I had no idea. And so it was really fun. Like, you're kind of recognized for all the work that you've done in the community. And so I was the female Citizen of the Year, and Joe Napier, who's the fire chief, he was the male Citizen of the Year, which he's a hard one to follow. He's pretty dynamic. So it was really fun, though, because you know, you get to ride in the parade. Normally you're going to ride in a convertible, and I found out that Joe actually knew how to ride a horse. So I was like, well, let's ride horses in the parade. So why don't you ride Francis and I'll ride my horse Diego? And it was really fun. And, you know, you're going down the route and all of Joe's, you know, fireman buddies are like, you know how to ride? Why are you on a mule? Like, what are you doing? You know? So it was really fun. And I think that maybe at the time I was probably doing a lot. You know, I served on the board for the Vaqueros, the rodeo, the Hellhole Canyon. I was running the Young Rider program for the Vaqueros at the time. And so I have stepped back a little bit, and Lisa Burkhardt's taken over the Young Rider program for the Vaqueros, and she's done a great job. And so I think it's good to kind of be able to pass that torch a little bit and be realistic about how much time I really have in the day. So
yes, and being a parent on top
yes.
of it, right? Okay.
I got a plan.
Go ahead.
The plane was a bit rowdy during that part.
Well,
if you pick up like in the middle of that, where you say, I think as far as making time for other things or having other people, just pick up on that maybe.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, she was talking about how when she won the Citizen of the Year, that
Yep.
one?
Yep.
Okay, so maybe
So
just...
go to the middle part of what I was talking about?
Yeah, the middle part.
Okay. So I think at the time I was probably doing more than what I should have taken on in life. I was serving on the board for the Vaqueros and Friends of Hellhole Canyon, the rodeo. I was running the pageant still and the Young Rider program for the Vaqueros. So I wouldn't give that up for anything. It was great. It was a wonderful time in my life, but I think as you get older and my kids have gotten older and more involved in stuff, I had to kind of pass the torch to other people. Lisa Burkhardt's taken over the Young Rider program for the Vaqueros. She's done a great job. The kids love her. So it's good to be able to kind of, you know, see other people take it on and me be realistic about how much time I have in the day.
Makes a lot of sense. We all need to do that,
yeah.
Right? We all need to take a look at that. Can you talk a little bit about horse care itself and how some people kind of create problems where they don't need to?
Yeah. So a lot of times I see people just over supplementing their horse. I mean, they're a pleasure rider riding once or twice a week, and they're giving their horse a ton of grain and a supplement for this and that. And I really think it's about keeping it simple. Most horses just need good quality hay. Sometimes an older horse might need a little bit of equine senior. They keep it simple. You know, people get into these fads and, you know, they want to buy this expensive bit or bridle or whatever. It doesn't mean you're going to be a better rider. So sometimes just going back to the basics, the basic care needs for your horse, you know, are kind of where it's at. I think that we've come a long way with our level of care that we can give to horses. You know, they're living a lot longer. And I think that, you know, you just kind of go back to the basics. They are happier living out in a bigger area, living with other horses. You're going to have less health issues that way. A lot of horses that are stabled and shown, lots of ulcers are going on. You know, they start getting little neurotic habits. Let them be a horse. So many times these show horses don't know how to be a horse. So if you can turn them out with others, let them kind of develop that hierarchy, you'll have a healthier horse.
Talk to me a little bit, just briefly, about being a woman in the horse world. Is it different today than it used to be? What are your thoughts about that?
Nowadays, you do probably see more women stepping up. I think when I was a kid, there were more, you know, men really at that top level. Whereas now it's probably a little bit more of an even playing field, but I do see a lot of men, you know, maybe they weren't riding for 20, 30 years. They came into it later in life and they excel really fast. And I think that where men have the advantage is they don't put so many feelings into it. Women are always, we kind of tend to humanize the horse, you know. Well, you know, they're not going to hurt me because they're my friend and I give them carrots. No, they'll still hurt you, you know. So a man, I think, is a little bit more of just a basic approach to the horse. And I think it's good to blend the two. But, you know, we all have a place in the industry. And I think that where trainers especially get into trouble is a lot of trainers have big egos. And, you know, you've got a product to sell. And so say you're pumping out world championship quarter horses, you've got to provide something. You've got to, you know, put that product out there. And some horses maybe aren't going to be at that level. So they've got that ego going and maybe they get into a little bit of trouble pushing the horse a little farther than what they need to. But I think we can all learn from each other. I love going to a show and just watching and seeing how other trainers do it. You know, there's always, somebody's always got another little way of doing it that might work and the horse might understand it better. So.
And that's really the bottom line, isn't it?
Yep.
Wow. Okay. And just briefly, going back to the beginning of when you started to ride, were you, I know for myself and for some other children, you know, in a child's life, they're kind of looking to escape from something, looking someplace that they might feel more safe or more accepted. Was any of that in your life at all?
I think for me it was, you know, my parents worked, you know, we were kind of latchkey kids, you know, we came home from school and my mom was really good about, you know, we were family, we all had to help. My sister and I made dinner, did the laundry, you know, we kind of kept things going as a family. But for me, like, it wasn't realistic that my parents could get me to like a baseball game to go do after school sports. But the horses I could walk to. So for me, it gave me that kind of that, just an activity to go do after school and not be in front of the TV. And I built, you know, lifelong friendships from it. And I think from seeing a lot of these lesson kids come, I think the horses are really good at building confidence. Some kids maybe aren't going to be that kid that's good at team sports. And so the horses are another avenue for them to go down. And you are a team, you're working with your horse, but, you know, it's not another team of other children. So, you know, I think that's where the horses are really good.
Very good. Very good.
I got to change a battery.
Okay.